Hello, hello, hello. Look at all you beautiful people. I Finally, Friday is being brought to you this week by Major Spoilers VIP and Patreon members from around the world. You can show your support for everything that we do by pointing your browser to patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Oh, hello, all you fabulous people. How are you doing on this fine Friday? I hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying out of trouble. Speaking of trouble, let's see if we can bring in this week's guest. Oh, there she is. All right.
Trouble is right. Slid right in there right before. Happy to be here. I'm tall for the first time ever. Yeah, I mean, I was tall in first grade, and it was kind of all downhill from there. A bunch of stuff. The continuing adventures of Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, people melting down all over Twitter, and continuing the trek through Legend of Korra, trying to decide if I like it this time or not.
And what's the verdict so far?
You know, it's funny because I went on a little rant on Ye Olde Major Spoilers podcast this week,
Yeah.
but the world is very interesting, and the way they advance the world is very gratifying, and it is much more sophisticated than The Last Airbender, but I maintain that I don't think the characters are as well executed. But I just watched the two-parter of the first Avatar with Vaatu and Rava, and like those episodes are magic, but those episodes don't involve any of the main characters.
Yeah,
So
that is one of the interesting things about that show. And Matthew kind of says, oh, you know, it's really a show about Varric. And it's not. No, it's not a show about Varric. But the one thing that I think the Korra does is it does highlight an entire cast of characters and puts the spotlight on them instead of just, you know, Aang or, you know, Aang, really. And so I think that makes the world feel a little bit bigger and well-rounded. And then when you can start bringing in some of those old Avatar characters, like Toph in, what is it, the third or fourth season?
Yes, and Zuko.
Yeah, I think
only
that's
for one episode, but I love him.
You know, but I think that's what makes it then interesting, because then you're like, oh, you know, I've been following the adventures of Korra and the two brothers and what's her face?
Mako and Bolin.
Yes,
and
I always forget the names.
Sokka.
My youngest would be yelling at me because he knows all these and rolls his eyes every time I get it wrong. But, you know, I think you're following their adventures, and then suddenly you get these older characters popping in, and then you're like, oh, wait, there is a much bigger world than, you know, what we have seen so far in the first two seasons, etc. of this show.
Yes.
So there you go. Let's see. Any danger of Mandalorian spoilers for today's episode? I don't think so, because I think we're going to talk about something else. But I will say I was the one time that I was like, oh no, during the whole episode was when that one thing was blown up real good. So that is the only thing that I'll say.
I was going to say, if people are worried about dangers of spoilers, you better stay off Twitter, because I definitely saw it before I left my bed this morning.
I got up at 5:30 to go out and do my walk.
That's the middle of the night, Steven.
It's dark, but see, I don't have to deal with people, so that's the nice thing. But I got up at 5:30 in the morning, went and did my walk, and when I came back, I just real quickly opened up Twitter before I jumped in the shower, and it was like, oh my gosh, Mandalorian spoiler. And it's like, well, spoilers don't really bother me, hence the name majorspoilers.com. But I was like, wow, it is like 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning when this person posted, and they've already watched it. So, I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
There you go.
You know what's not okay, or you know who's not okay? The theater owners. The theater owners
like the PR people at
are
Marvel?
like freaking the heck out because, for those of you who haven't seen this happened yesterday. HBO Max and Warner Bros. Have announced that they're sending all of their films, all 17 of the films that they had scheduled for 2021, they are sending them to HBO Max and theaters on the exact same day. So what does this mean? Matrix 4, The Suicide Squad, Dune, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Those Who Wish Me Dead.
In the Heights.
In the Heights. Malignant, The Many Saints of Newark, King Richard, and Cry Macho. Or Macho. Cry Macho instead of Mako.
Cry
I'm thinking
Macho.
of Legend of Korra. But, all ththese movies, HBO and Warner Brothers, we call them AT&T, have basically said, yeah, you know what? We're going to just do this day and date release all over the place. And that's the way it will be. Now, for those of you that may be freaking out, keep this in mind. Those HBO movies are only going to be on HBO Max for the first 30 days, after which they will go to premium VOD. So if you're someone that loves to buy your movies and download them and preserve them via Apple iTunes, you can do that. If there is another streaming service like a Vudu or something like that that wants to acquire these things and you pay for them, you can do that as well. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And this right now is for their entire 2021 slate of films, although AT&T CEO John, I guess this guy's, I'm going to say Stan Key, because I don't think it's Stanky, although it could be Stanky. John Stankey.
I'm going to say if you are Stanky, strong choice and we applaud it.
Yes. John Stankey, AT&T CEO, said, "In March, we unleashed a new normal in society. That horse left the barn. I don't think any of us are going to change that dynamic." Which, first of all, let's get some reactions from Ashley Victoria Robinson. This shouldn't come as a big surprise because HBO and Warner Brothers and AT&T did announce that Wonder Woman 1984 was dropping on HBO Max and in theaters on December 25th of this year, and that it's the same thing. 30 days on HBO Max, then it will go out into the wild for anyone who wants to purchase it, and theaters can run these at the same time.
Yeah, my first thought was, why would you do this? It seems at first blush a very strange and extreme choice. But when you consider the fact that every executive who is used to getting a bonus at every single quarter has lost nothing but billions of dollars at all major studios across the board, not just WB, not just Disney, this makes a lot more sense. Oh, look at the little walking man.
Thank you, Lois Boy.
And I think somebody in some meeting, probably for the fourth quarter, said, if we do this, we will make some money. Mm-hmm. Plus, we know that there's been a lot of discussion around HBO Max, whether or not it's successful, measures being taken to drive subscribers. This announcement just guarantees that everyone in the world is going to sign up for HBO Max who wasn't already signed up for it to begin with. So It is one of those things where when you sort of macrocosm it, it makes a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. And given the fact that DC, which is a subsidiary of WB, which is a subsidiary of AT&T, is stepping away from their dedication to the direct market as we understand it, with stepping away from Diamond, moving their release dates to Tuesday, then Wednesday, I don't think it should be surprising that we're stepping away from cinemas and our dedication to cinema owners. Yeah. And it will be very interesting to see. I knew movie theaters, I knew the death of cinema in a traditional sense would happen in my lifetime. I just didn't think it would happen next year. So I thought it would be 10 years from now. I think we're going to go to an iPic, a more boutique style, as opposed to like the mass cinema domes that we have in LA right now. That's what I mean by that. So, just like a caveat.
For those of you, again, who may be freaking out about this, and it's the death of movie theaters, keep in mind that Universal has just recently struck a deal with Regal and AMC to say that you can have the movie first for the first 5 weekends, providing that, for the first 17 days, providing that the opening weekend doesn't make more than $50 million or something like that. If it makes more than $50 million, then you can keep it into your theater for 4 consecutive weekends, and then we will also release it on premium VOD. So a lot of studios are doing this. here's the bigger issue, and I think it is trying to get to a new normal. But I think that, especially with Wonder Woman 1984, when this pandemic started back in March of this year, I went to the grocery store in a vain attempt to buy some surplus food and some toilet papers and all of this stuff. And as I walked down the chip aisle, because, chips are a necessity when you're staying at home, I passed...
That's just a scientific fact.
I passed the Doritos that had the Wonder Woman promotional on it, right?
Yes.
This was in February and March, and I even tweeted out saying, oh, nothing like trying to get ahead of the curve on your promotion. So you know that somebody took a bath on that promotion. That movie was supposed to come out in April of this year? And then it got pushed off,
May,
and then it was pushed off, and then it was pushed off, and finally they said, we cannot push these films off indefinitely. And so I think part of this is we can't keep Dune on the shelf until movie theaters around the world have decided that it's safe enough to go back there. So we need to get these out. We can't leave these stacking up because that's money spent. That's a sunk cost that we're never going to recoup if we don't get these movies out and start making some money in some way, shape, or form. Now, will all of these big $100 million movies lose money? Probably. I mean, you can look at what's that service that they were running for a while where you pay $10.99 a month and you can go see all the movies you want at the movie theater, and how that business fell apart very quickly.
Movie Pass?
Yeah, Movie Pass.
AMC Movie Pass?
Yeah. So that kind of fell apart, and that's kind of what's going to happen here is these movies are they losing money? That's a big question, because the right to run these movies, HBO has to buy those from Warner Brothers, right? So, I mean, even though they're the same company, there's still a column for HBO budgets, a column for Warner Brothers budgets, and they have to pass those things back and forth. The other thing that I think...
there are things like theatrical is here, right? Consumer products is here. Streaming is here. Movies are here.
Yep. So the other thing that I think is also necessitating this push is we are still literally in the middle of a pandemic. And when we know that, yes, Pfizer and Moderna and this other one already have these vaccines in the process, they haven't been approved here in the United States. Pfizer was approved for use in the UK.
Yeah, like next week.
Yes, but here's the thing. The health officials for our county said, and I don't know if it's for just our county or for the entire state. If it's just for our county, it's not too bad. But if it's for the entire state, 20,000 doses of the vaccine initially coming to Kansas. Well, there are 240,000 people living in Johnson County alone. We're not going to, and my son today, my youngest was asking me today, he's like, hey, Dad, I think he was asking for wanting to see grandparents over the Christmas holiday. He goes, is the vaccine available yet? I'm like, no, buddy, it's not. And by the time the vaccine gets distributed, you and I will be one of the last ones to get it because we're not frontline workers. My wife will get it before we get it because she's a nurse, elderly, and, medical professionals and emergency responders will get it long before Ashley Victoria Robinson gets it. But that doesn't mean that Ashley Victoria Robinson isn't susceptible to catching that. So she still has to stay at home. She still has to be cautious when she goes out. And she most certainly probably isn't, until she has been vaccinated, going to go to the movie theater.
No, absolutely not.
Now, we don't know when a needle is going to be injected into our arms. And believe me, I have no problem taking the vaccine for this thing. We don't have any idea of when we are going to get it. So until the population of the United States gets about 70% inoculated, that's probably going to be May or June before that happens.
At the earliest.
I know. And so can you see where Warner Brothers is coming from when they say, no, we're just going to do this thing. And if you're a theater that's open and you want to be part of this, that's fine. You can make your money, but we want to give this option and try to make some money off of this. Now, the one person, let's see if I can find this quote now that the page is refreshed. Here it is. This is a story on Vulture. You're going to set up a consumer pattern that they'll expect this stuff, said an exec at another studio. You're going to have event movies that you have to see in movie theaters and have to experience on a big screen. If I can only see Blockbuster X because it's not available on a streaming service, I'm going to get in my car, pay my $10, and I'm going to go to the theater. Every movie that is not an event movie, you're just not going to go to. Sounds really weird, Ashley, because just a couple of months ago. Yeah, we were just talking about this, right? How Bill and Ted and others are going to make a lot of money this way.
There's also people who already don't go to movie theaters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I'm sure most people here are Major Spoilers podcast listeners. It takes an act of Congress for the beloved Matthew Peterson to go see something in the cinema. And this is just going to push people. I agree. I do agree. I think we will move to a position where only tentpoles and probably Oscar bait projects and then vanity projects that actors and producers who are rich enough to accrue a theatrical run for will be in. But I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't think it is either.
Think that as a creator and as an entertainment writer, I think that opens up way more content and then way more content possibilities. And ultimately, for me, that's exciting because more things are going to be made at like a $10 million, a $5 million budget. Not everything is going to have to make $1 billion to be worth a damn in the eyes of production.
So one of the things that this pointed out, and I've just started reading the book. Gosh darn it, I should always have these pulled up ahead of time because I always forget the titles of the books. The one that I am reading right now is called something, something, something. Well, let's see if Steven can find it. It is called, The Big Picture. Okay. The Fight for the Future of Hollywood. And it's all based on the email hacks that Sony went through. And I just started it, so they're kind of giving some background on Amy Pascal and everything. But one of the things that the author points out, and it's something that I've talked about before, is the purpose of a tentpole film. A tentpole film is a movie that does tend to cost a lot of money, but at the same time makes a lot of money. Sound of Music, Jaws, Star Wars, Titanic, Avatar. And what are those tentpole movies supposed to do, Ashley?
They are supposed to float your smaller, weirder artistic choices like Get Out, like Little Women, or some of the biopics and your Oscar bait award season movies that, while they might get critical acclaim, will not make $1 billion. Emma is a great example of that.
So of these ones that I'm going to read out, which ones do you think have less than a $50 million budget? Suicide Squad, The Matrix, Dune, Godzilla vs. Kong, Space Jam: A New Legacy, Little Things.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that one is either. Judas. Judas and the Black Messiah, sorry. Tom and Jerry. That one's probably, that one may still be about an $80 million movie.
Animated, so yeah.
Mortal Kombat.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's got a lot of special effects stuff in there. Those Who Wish Me Dead, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, In the Heights. Now,
Conjuring probably is.
Yeah, so we are now past the halfway point on the list before we get to those that we consider probably in that $50 million range.
Yeah.
If Warner Brothers was doing it right, they would say, okay, The Matrix 4 is going to be huge. Dune is going to be huge. Tenet is going to be huge. And because of all the billions of dollars that Tenet is going to make, we can take a risk on
Tenet.
the next, the next Get Out. But they're not going to be able to do that unless there's a fundamental restructuring of how they fund movies, which is the other thing that I think Vulture pointed out was that apparently the day that this was announcement was made yesterday, that morning, the studios were calling around to all the agencies talking about, I don't know if they were specifically talking about future contracts or contracts on these movies that they're releasing to HBO Max next year. But I think that we're going to see a lot of a push from studios to say, I'm sorry, Robert Downey Jr., you don't need $100 million to play Tony Stark.
True. And I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, particularly if Disney gets on board, about the idea of points off the back end. Because I guarantee you, Scarlett Johansson has points off the back end of Black Widow, which is why Black Widow is not in this discussion right now and why Disney has not announced that it's going to streaming.
Yeah, no.
Because RDJ did that and made a ton of money, and now Marvel stars in particular built that into their contracts.
Yeah. So I think that there's going to be some interesting things going on here. But here's the thing. I do not think that this is the end of movie theaters. It might be the end of smaller theaters. Like my local theater probably isn't going to survive, even though it's owned by AMC. I think AMC is going to take a look at stuff come June, July of next year, and they're going to say, I'm sorry, Hayes, Kansas, a place where you once had 8 screens. We are now going to close them all because it's just not profitable for us because everybody's staying home and watching on HBO Max. That means that if I want to go see the very last Quentin Tarantino movie, his 10th and final movie, I'm going to have to go to some place that is showing it. Probably Kansas City. Oh, guess what? The Hateful Eight? That's exactly what my wife and I did on Christmas. We went and spent Christmas Eve in Kansas City so we could go see The Hateful Eight on a big 70mm projection because it was an event. And part of that event was we got the booklet that comes with the movie and all the other little things that used to be part of a big movie-going experience back in the 30s and 40s before World War II, and even shortly after, as theaters were trying to compete with television. So, as Steven Spielberg and George Lucas predicted 10 years ago, and I kind of said, bah, no one's going to pay $75 for a ticket. If it becomes an event film, if the next Lin-Manuel Miranda movie is a huge thing, and people want to see it, and they're willing to pay $75 and go see it at the 1,000 screens across the country, that's the way it's going to be.
Yes.
So
and that, I mean,
go ahead.
It's sort of this thing to me where people have no choice but to get on board with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to happen, and if you feel that strongly about it and you do not want to participate, then you can't watch any of those movies, and we know how the pop culture sphere works. No one's going to do that.
Right. But here is the thing. Those people that do sit there and go, I'm not giving HBO Max my money. I'm already paying blah, blah, blah per month to Netflix. Fine, don't do it.
Yep.
30 days, you can go to the movie theater and you can pay $10 to go see that one movie, or pay another $10 to go see Dune, and pay another $10 to go see The Matrix 4. Could have just paid $10 and got the HBO Max subscription, but fine, whatever. At the end of that time, if you're someone who does buy movies on iTunes because you want to download the 4K version of it, you can do that. You're going to pay $25 for it, but you're going to be able to do that, or $19.99 or whatever. What's that slasher film with that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago on the Major Spoilers podcast? It's out today, this weekend. That's the Freaky Friday. I think it's called Freaky is what it is. The body swapping slasher film. $19.95 to rent that. I'm probably going to do it just because I'm curious to see what this movie is about.
Honestly, not a bad price to rent it either.
No. That's, I mean, for the cost of, if my wife wants to watch it, and she probably will, for the two of us to go to the theater, there's $50 right there. So we're actually saving money. Here's the other thing. And this is something that I've talked about recently, and there's been some discussions on online, and people have asked questions. I've got a home theater. It's not a great home theater. For years, we've had a 1080p projector, and I could get about a 100-inch projection on the wall, and it was fine. But the problem is, it's 1080p, and you have to have all the lights off, because once the bulb starts going, it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer and harder to see. And sometimes you need to see what the remote says so you can push the right button, and you can't do that with the lights off. And so we have just upgraded to a new, flat screen television that is now in the house. And it looks really good. And I watched the new Mandalorian, where that one thing what made me go, oh no, happened. But I had the lights on while I watched it, and it was perfectly comfortable. Somebody on Twitter was like, oh, I'm going to convince my wife that we need a projector. I'm like, no, you don't. You can go and get a 75-inch flat screen TV at Walmart today for less than $800. Now, I know $800 is a lot for a lot of people. But if you're a cinemaphile...
Hey, I'm right there with you. It's a lot for me.
It is. But if you're someone that really wants that big screen experience, and you want to go big, a 75-inch TV right now for $659, that's within reach of a lot of people. And to be able to sit in front of that 65-inch or 75-inch or 85-inch, or if you're someone that can afford the 100-inch screen, if you can sit on your couch in your comfortable clothes and you can eat the snacks that you want to eat, that you're not paying $25 for a tub of soda, then that's something that you might really want to consider. And as HBO and as Disney and as these others start to buy into this same-day service, and Steven Soderbergh is over there laughing his ass off, this might be the new normal.
It'll be very interesting for us to come back to Filing Friday a year from today and sort of digest what this year looked like, because maybe it was on either Vox or Vice. I'm so sorry to the publication who I read this for, but they said that the minute another major studio gets on board with this, that's when we're going to see like major changes to cinema. And there's a lot of time between now and then for Disney or Paramount or Universal to make the same type of offering. We know Paramount Plus is right around the corner, so...
Well, here's the thing.
It'll be...
I fully expect Disney to jump on board with this. They're already doing it, right? Jazz is coming out, or Soul is coming out on Christmas Day. Onward,
yeah, so excited.
Came out like right at the same time or even before it hit theaters. So Disney is really on board with this. They're just not publicly saying it. But when they get to that point where they have to get Black Widow up on that streaming release, that's when everything Disney will just say, that's it, we're doing it. Again, there are ways that people can push back. Obviously, as you just said, you are an actress. You have some rates that you work with that you're because you're a SAG, that you get specific rates, and they can't go below that for certain types of films. And certainly as contracts get negotiated and Robert Downey Jr. says, yes, I'll take $200 million for that next Iron Man appearance, studios are going to have to figure out, well, how are we going to make this money? Well, we have to send it to the big screen. You've got the Academy.
Or they're going to start hiring a lot more people with a lot less impressive credits. People can hire me at any time. I don't need points off no back end.
That is true. But you also have the Academy, right? The Academy of Motion Pictures. And who put on the Oscars, and they're like, no, if you want to be considered for an Oscar, you have to have your show in a theater. And so, the Academy can push back on, and the Directors Guild, certainly Christopher Nolan has it in his contract, that if you want this movie, you've got to put it in theaters first. So I think
It'll be interesting, though, to see how long that keeps carrying over. Like the points on the back end. I
think it will, because here's the thing. We talked about this over the summer. AMC had to go to somebody in China to get a $500 million investment to keep going. Just recently, they announced that they needed, and they were pursuing an $843 million investment. So making them so far this year $1.2 billion in the hole. Well, somebody's going to come calling for that money pretty soon. And my guess is that you're going to see Disney or Netflix or Sony or AT&T step up and say, yes, AMC, yes, Regal, yes, Cinemark, yes, Dickinson, yes, all these other theaters, we'll buy you. And then when the Academy says, oh, you have to be in your theater, oh, that's fine. We'll put it in our own theaters. The government has done away with vertical integration. They said it's no longer necessary to have vertical integration. So I think you're going to see the return to the days when the movie theater, like for those of you in Atlanta, J. Michael T., the Fox Theater downtown. Well, it's called the Fox Theater because it used to be owned by 20th Century Fox. But we have our own Fox Theater here in town. Used to be a Fox Theater. The Pantages there in the El Capitan in Hollywood is there, owned by Disney. It's not going to be surprise me when
surely are.
It's not going to surprise me when Netflix steps up and says, "Oh, we want to be considered for more Oscars, and you guys are putting the block up. So yeah, we'll go ahead and buy a theater chain, and we'll run our movies in the theater chain same day that we drop them on Netflix." And then Academy, you can't say anything. Although Academy could change their rules and say, "Oh, it's got to be 17 days or 30 days or whatever it may be." But
they could, and that's probably what'll happen. The comment about a monopoly in the film industry is hysterical to me, given that we've watched Disney slowly eat 25% of the film industry in the last 5 years.
Yeah. So yes, Captain,
but yes,
etc.
it is supposed to be an issue, but it's just not been listened to. It's more of a suggestion at this point, really.
Yeah, so Captain, etc. I thought they banned that level of monopoly on the film industry. They did. That was the whole point of the Paramount et al. Case from 1957. And that essentially destroyed the monopoly. So. But the the Federal Trade Commission petitioned last year and basically told the government and said, you know what, we do not see this really being necessary anymore. So we can sundown this ruling. We can get rid of this. We don't think it's going to be a problem. We don't think that studios are going to become vertically integrated where, Ashley can only work for Warner Brothers going forward. Might. She's under a contract to work with them exclusively. But they said, no, we don't think that's going to happen.
A lot of actors, though, do have first look deals. Yeah. Like, if you wonder why Robert Pattinson is Batman, Robert Pattinson and the alternate for Batman, Nick, I can't remember your last name. I'm so sorry. You were Beast. They have a first look deal at WB, which means that they put WB above all else, and they have non-coms as well. So we have a version of it.
Yeah.
It's just a slightly like the doors aren't shut, but they're tight.
So they've sundowned that ruling, which means I think it's 2022 or 2025. I forget which one of those dates. But that's the date when it totally goes away, and I'm going to bet by 2022, you're going to see Disney and Netflix and Sony and AT&T start sniffing around, looking at movie chains to buy. Even if it's just part of a chain, even if they just sell, even if AMC just sells off the middle part of the country's chains, somebody's going to buy that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, I've talked about this before, and it's really weird to just kind of see all this starting to build up and hit those predictions that we've been talking about for, 2 years now, 3 years now, 10 years now.
I was going to say all this stuff that Steve has been talking about since when I was just a listener to the Major Spoilers podcast.
And now you're here.
In the before time.
I'm sorry, I've talked so much, Ashley. What other thoughts do you have on what's going on?
I was going to say the Mandalorian is like playing so loud in the next room. So if anyone can hear it,
there's so many explosions and shootings and things that are getting destroyed and appearances by people that you thought were long gone.
I just keep hearing the theme and I'm like, oh, this is good music. Like I said, ultimately, I'm trying to look at it as someone who can be excited by these changes, because change typically is difficult but leads to good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think between now and 2025, I think it's going to be weird and uncomfortable for everyone from like the EPs down to the consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will take a minute for us to figure out what this new normal is. But
yeah,
I think jumping to the reaction that this is a bad thing, I think is the wrong conclusion.
No,
thank you for the Jupiter Jet.
Yes. Actually, there it is right there on the comic book rack. Top row.
Steven promised me.
Jupiter Jet and the Lost Radio. So here's the other thing that's going to be
hopefully by the time that gets adapted, it'll all be sorted out.
Well, so here's the other thing, right? You already mentioned it before. This is going to force a lot of studios to relook and examine how much money they're willing to spend, because they're not going to be able to get every movie into the theater if they want to recoup budgets and use tentpole films for what they need to be. So we're going to be looking at sub $50 million movies, which means, and especially if this goes well, this means that there's the potential. We see this happening with Netflix already. We see the potential for a lot more voices and a greater variety of movies to be seen and to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of excites me, because one of the things that I've always wished that would happen would be like George Clooney and Ron Howard and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and Samuel L. Jackson and all these people to just pool their money together into like several $1 billion that would just go to make $20 million and less movies for people of color and minorities that don't.
You're talking about a version of United Artists.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because
which is where, like, put your money where your mouth is, because you understand what the industry needs.
Yeah, and this would be a great way to find the next Rick Fumiyami. I think that's his last name, probably, or the next
Carrie Fuki. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna look up his name.
Yeah, to look at people who don't usually get that chance to make their own movie, because right now the studios are so focused on
Cary Fukunaga. That's what I was thinking of.
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I couldn't pull his last name.
Focusing on the next big $1 billion picture, whereas if they can focus on $20 million movie and get enough people to watch it on their streaming service, that'll pay for itself. And Netflix is already doing that. If you go and look at all the original content that Netflix is buying or funding, it's more than Warner Brothers will put out next year.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're going to see this.
Like Mank came out today.
Oh, and I forgot that came out today.
Yeah, Netflix has been giving us nothing but new content this whole year, which was what was so hysterical to me at the beginning of the pandemic, where people were like, there's nothing to watch.
Mm-hmm.
There's no new content coming out. It's like, but there is.
Yep.
Also, podcasts are free. Please become patrons.
Yes, exactly. So again, we can't do what we do. We can't continue to do Finally Friday like we do it without the fine support of all of our patrons over at patreon.com/majorspoilers. We're going to show their names here in just a second. Lagnus says, I see Forgotten Radio is not out yet on Comixology. How long after all the Kickstarters have gone out before that happens? Do you know the answer to that, Ashley?
I do not know the answer to that. The answer to that is please email Action Lab and tell them that you would like to see it, because that is out of my hands. My publisher deals with that, not me. Right now, Comixology, I'm looking at it, says December 9th, which means it's being released along with the traditional book market, which would be 2 weeks after. Yeah. But if you have questions about that, tweet at Action Lab, email Action Lab, and let them know, because that's... if it was in my hands, it would have been out last Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if they say December 9th, that's next week.
I appreciate the ask. I really do.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Malone says, I kind of like that. Didn't really care about anyone starting after 1995 or so in big movies anyway, with few exceptions, but I'm getting old. So what do I know? Oh, they're talking about indie films and no-name actors showing up and stuff, which, you know, in its own way is very good, because you get a different approach to something. As much as I like Tom Hanks, every movie feels like a Tom Hanks movie. So, I don't know.
And that's the only way that we're going to keep getting new and innovative and exciting things.
Yep, we got to do it. So, come on, let's get the next. Maybe Netflix is the next United Artists. I don't know. But I think we need the next United Artists.
They're making a good play for it.
Yeah. All right, Ashley, where can people find you and more about you? And more importantly, where can they get this Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio?
Heck yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V Robinson. The V is very important. You can check out Geek History Lesson in the Major Spoilers podcast feed. New episodes, we have almost 350 episodes. So if you are one of those people who was panicking about content at the beginning, listen to that, and then listen to everything else in the feed, because it's all fabulous. And before I was in it, I still listen to every show that I'm not on. So check it out.
There you go.
Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio is available where all fine comics can be found. If you're a Kickstarter backer, you got an email with your tracking number. Unless you're one of the 30 people who didn't give us your address, please do that. We're happy to send them.
Yep, I got mine this week, and I think a bunch of other people got them. So
next week.
Yep.
Yeah,
It is.
And then coming to Comixology someday.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, if you are not currently a patron and you can kick in a few bucks a month, we'd certainly love for you to join all these awesome people that you're going to see coming up over at patreon.com/majorspoilers. Thank you so much, everyone. We will be back next week. So until then, do good, be good, and we'll see you again very soon. Your name could be here. Seriously. Your name could be here. Oh, thank you, Lagnus. Thank you, Malone. Thank you, Captain, etc. Thank you, everyone else who showed up. Old X 1210. Marshall Nesbitt showing up in the room. The one J. Michael T. You're all awesome. Laugh-A-Jet. We didn't talk about international. Maybe we'll have to talk about that in the future. Mark Smith 72 showed up in the room. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sin Hunter. Everybody, thank you. We'll see you again very soon.